Welcome to April's Coastal Garden. You know, things are warming up and I know you want to get out and enjoy it. A little later on, Chantel is going to join us and look at some light treats from our own vegetable garden. Speaking of vegetable gardens, we'll show you some things that need to be planted, I'll say middle of the month on. But first, we're going to take a look at some beautiful flowering trees that you might want to add to your landscape. The first group is what we might call the flowering fruit trees. When you think of those, you probably think about things like Bradford pears, Yoshino cherries, those kind of things, but we got something a little bit different for you. We have a couple of peaches. Now these have an NC State connection. The guy who was the breeder on these is Dr. Dennis Werner, who is a professor at NC State in Raleigh. This is one called Corinthian Rose Flowering Peach. Now there are 4 different ones in this Corinthian series, but they're all like this. They're all columnar, very tightly habited. So this is a great tree to add where you don't have a lot of horizontal space. So if you're looking for these in the nursery trade, you'll find rose, mauve, pink, and white. The one we have here in the children's garden, of course, is rose. But you'll notice that it has the really nice, light pink to a little darker in the center. It's very nice double flowering. And again, very tightly habited. Another small peach that we have that you might want to take a look at, also done by Dr. Werner, is this one that we have here in the children's garden also called Bonfire. Now Bonfire is a little different. It's going to be a little more of a wider spreader. It's still a small plant. It's going to get 6, 7 feet wide and about that same height after many years. But you see it has a little different flower, not quite as much a truly double, but somewhat of a pink color. And it flowers heavily, and this one even produces fruit. The Corinthian series, the really upright, tightly habited ones, don't usually produce fruit, but the Bonfire actually will. Where would you grow these? Just like you would most other flowering fruit trees, they're going to need full sun and decent soil with good drainage. If you can't provide that, you don't need to add these plants to your landscape. Any amount of sun, any kind of even marginally poor drainage, and these plants will not perform well for you. A couple of other flowering fruit trees that you might want to take a look at if you have a little bit more space in your garden are some of the flowering cherries that are blooming right now. We have one called Dreamcatcher, which isn't quite as common in the trade, that's just beginning to bloom as we speak, and another one called Snow Goose, which you probably would expect would be a white flowering one. These are in the trade, maybe not quite as common as Yoshino and Autumnalis and some of the others, but they are certainly out there and you can add them to your garden. Just keep in mind, they're going to be a little bit larger plants, so give them a little extra room. But again, full sun, good drainage, decent soils. If native plants are your thing, think about red buds. We have several selections to show you. Now, the redbud world has changed a lot in the last few years from this native plant that you see here in bloom. Not that there's anything wrong with the standard redbuds, but so much work has gone into producing these newer cultivars that I thought you should see some of them that we have here at the Arboretum. The one that I'm standing next to is an older cultivar called Oklahoma. It's a beautiful tree, a little bit smaller than the standard redbud that you see in the woods around here. Really glossy foliage, nice flowers, not going to be quite, as I said, quite as large, but going to be a 20-foot tree eventually. A sister plant to Oklahoma is one called Texas White. And you might think, well, that probably has white flowers, so it's kind of a conundrum in that it's a white flowered redbud. But Texas White is an excellent plant, also has the glossy foliage, and going to be about the same size as Oklahoma. You can also get different forms in redbuds. One of the best weeping forms is this one that we have here in the children's activity area of the garden called Traveler. And if you're going to buy a weeping redbud, this one is definitely better than Covey that you often see sold as Lavender Twist. Lavender Twist or Covey is a weeper, but it's not as good a performer for us here in southeastern North Carolina as Traveler. Lots of work has gone into redbuds to get different foliage colors. Here's one called Solar Eclipse that has beautiful kind of goldy yellow new foliage as it unrolls. You can see it here. Lots of other work gone into getting variegated forms, all kinds of purple leaf forms. The same guy at NC State has worked on the ones that they call Merlot, which is a good purple leaf variety. We have Burgundy Hearts here at the Arboretum that's also a purple leaf variety, same kind of flowers. And another weeper called Ruby Falls, that's an NC State selection. So In the world of red buds, it's a lot different than it used to be, where you only had basically the native small tree. You can get weepers, different foliage colors, all kinds of interesting plants. So take a look at your local nurseries, come to the Arboretum, check those out, see them as they're blooming, see them as that new foliage is unfurling. I think you'll find some pretty interesting trees that you might really want to add to your own landscape. So say you found that perfect red bud that you want to grow in your own landscape, what is it going to take? Pretty typical of an understory plant in the landscape. You're going to need decent drainage, not quite as critical as it is with the flowering fruit trees. These plants are not usually ones that you would put completely in full sun. Now, there are some exceptions to that, just like the Oklahoma and the Texas white. If you want to grow a red bud in full sun, those would be the ones to do. If you have some of the others, especially the ones with the variegated foliage, the gold foliage, you're probably going to want a little bit of protection from the hottest part of the day. Still lots of light, kind of like you'd grow a flowering dogwood, but not quite as finicky about the soil drainage. Decent soil, red buds are going to do just fine. So if you like the flowering fruit trees and the red buds, you still have time to get those in the landscape, so planting those would be a great thing to do right now, sooner the better. In the lawn, it's a little different though. Right now is not a great time, especially early in the month of April. Most of the things we need to do with weed control, fertilization is either too late or too early. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, and we'll talk about some weed control that you might actually want to do in your shrub beds. When it comes to lawns this time of year, you start to see that little bit of green growth. You say, man, it ought to be time to get out there and throw the fertilizer. That is the worst thing you could do to your warm season grasses right now. You should not be applying any fertilizer that contains nitrogen until you've needed to mow it twice. And that's usually going to be at the earliest, the end of this month, and a lot of times into early May. So don't put the early fertilizer on. These grasses don't have the root system to support it, and you're really going to be hurting yourself with that. Keep it mowed when it needs it, keep the debris cleaned off. Not a good time to apply weed control either. The spring transition, when these grasses are trying to green up, is a very sensitive time. The best thing to do, keep it mowed, keep the debris cleaned up, leave all the other off at least until the end of the month or early next month. Now your shrub beds are a little bit different. This is a good time to think about using a pre-emerge herbicide. You've always battled a lot of weeds later in the season. These will help prevent a lot of those weeds from coming up and infesting your beds. Now keep in mind a few things about pre-emerge herbicides though. They're not labeled for every plant that you might have in a mixed shrub perennial border. So you really need to read the labels carefully. The product that you most often find is the active ingredient trifluralin, which is sold as Preen, and it's sold under some other names too. This is a fairly safe product, and it's pretty darn good on grasses, not so good on a lot of the broadleaf weeds, but at least it will help you some. There are some other products like this Snapshot that we're using here in the rose garden. Gives you a little broader spectrum, but you really have to be careful again with what you apply it around, because you may do some injury to some plants that you didn't want to have that happen to. If you're applying pre-emerge herbicides to your beds, one thing you'll find on the label is to make sure that if you have newly planted things, that they're watered in well and settled. You don't want to have plants with air pockets and that herbicide get washed in next to the root system. You may see some injury. So this is a great time of year to go ahead and get the pre-emerge herbicide out to minimize those weed problems later in your shrub beds, but not a great time to do any fertilizing or weed control in your lawn, at least until the very end of the month. Stick with us. When we come back, we're going to get right into the vegetable garden.
What we do to the planet, we do to ourselves. You can help keep America beautiful. Visit KAB.org.
Welcome back to the show. You know, now is a great time to start thinking about the vegetable garden. Spring is here, temperatures warming up. You know you got to plant those things like tomatoes and peppers, eggplant, all that summer stuff that we normally plant. A little bit about how to grow vegetables here in southeastern North Carolina, though. One of the things about vegetable gardening is you have to have a couple of things: access to water, and you have to have good soil. And a lot of times the soils here just aren't very good in their native condition. If you look at the garden we have here at the Arboretum, you see these very high raised beds, and they are full of a prepared media that's pine bark and potting media and cow manure and all these high organic products mixed together and added to each year. That's what you really have to do well with vegetables here. Put them in the native soil, probably not going to be such a great result there. The other thing, of course, you see the drip hoses here. We use the drip irrigation in these beds, and that is the way to go with vegetables. You don't really want to wet the foliage of a lot of plants, things like cucumbers and all the plants with big leafy, wide leaves that are very susceptible to leaf spots and those kind of things. Keeping that foliage dry, so the drip or low volume irrigation is the way to go. And these are fairly simple ways to do it with these tubes with the built-in emitters. So good soil, access to water, obviously in general mostly full sun, although there are some things that do fairly well with a little bit of shade, but generally the things like we're talking about planting now, the tomatoes and things like that, really need full sun to be the best that they can be. A lot of people struggle with tomatoes here, and that is something that is not unusual. If you've tried it and hadn't had great success, you're not by yourself there. We have a lot of things that give us problems: foliar diseases, bacterial wilt that's in our soils, nematodes, all of that. The point of that is, if you have access to something that has disease resistance, remember all those letters on the tag, VFNT and all of those others that signify different disease resistance built into that plant. Use that to your advantage, because you need every bit of it you can get. So once you've figured out what you're going to plant, you've got the soil, I guess it's time to plant. You look at these tomatoes we have here, this is probably, it'd be hard to see it looking at it right now, but this is one of the more prolific cherry tomatoes. It's called Sweet Million. And if you want a cherry tomato, this one will produce and keep producing for a long period of time. But you look at that plant and you say, that transplant's not all that impressive. It's a little leggy. What are we going to do about all of that? One of the things about tomatoes that you can do, you can plant them, and we'll show you here in just a moment, but if you plant this stem underneath the soil slightly, you'll get rooting along the stem. Can't do that with everything, but it does work with tomato. You don't want to bury it all the way up deeply. So what we'll do is we'll choose a spot here. We'll just kind of rake out a shallow area. We'll set our root ball down in here like this. Lay that stem along there and then cover it. And what you'll find is you'll have a really nice root system on that plant, and you get all that rooting along the stem. Again, you can't do that with everything. Some things, beans and things like that, if you had those, that would be a bad idea, but on tomato it works. One caution about the timing though, keep in mind that this year we've had some kind of late cold, and if you're wanting to be completely sure that you're not going to get some injury on these plants from cold weather late in the season, I don't want to wait until the middle of the month before you plant things like tomatoes. Remember that these plants are tropical, and when the soil temperatures are still cold and the daytime temperatures are still not really that warm, they're not going to grow that well anyway. So an early planting, unless you're willing to go to some heroic measures to keep them going, probably better off just to wait until after the middle of the month or so, after tax day, and do your planting then. You'll probably do just about as well as anyone else as far as getting that first tomato fruit. This is a great time of year to go ahead with the peppers, the eggplant, the tomatoes, those kind of plants. You can direct seed things like cucumbers and squash. You can also grow those out like we've done here with this cucumber if you'd like, but get that little bit of a head start. One of the things that once we've got them planted like we have here, whatever you're planting, whether it's new seeds or if we have transplants like these little tomatoes, you need to water them in. Another thing to remember about these plants, and the tomatoes especially, is when the soil temperatures are chilly or cool like they are now, and the daytime temperatures are not ideal for these plants to really grow well, one thing you can do that'll help these plants get a head start is to add a little bit of soluble fertilizer and water them in with that solution, something like you use for house plants. The ones that have a little extra shot of phosphorus, like the 15-30-15 analysis, is a good choice here because phosphorus is limited in its availability when the soils are cool. So you may even see, if you've ever seen some of the older leaves of your tomatoes turn kind of a burgundy color, that's a phosphorus deficiency, but it's not because you probably don't have enough phosphorus in the soil. It's because the soil temperatures are cool and these plants don't have much of a root system on them. So what we're going to do is water these in with this fertilizer solution, settle that soil really well. And of course we've got good drainage here. We don't have to worry about any kind of water standing on them. Even if we put a lot like that, that's still going to give us that nice drainage with this high organic matter, elevated beds. That's what we want with these vegetables. So if you want to have success with vegetables here in southeastern North Carolina, you're going to have to do the soil prep with high organic matter stuff, get the pH right, high fertility, consider the raised beds, use the drip irrigation, choose plants that are adapted well, and we have lists like that in Cooperative Extension here at the Arboretum if you need that. You can also find a lot of that online. But once you've done all of that, choose that full sun location, make sure you got plenty of water to keep them going through the summer, and you should have great success with your vegetables, even those tomatoes that are so difficult to grow. Stick with us after the break. Chantel's got some recipes straight from the garden.
What we do to the planet, we do to ourselves. You can help keep America beautiful. Visit KAB.org.
Welcome back to the Coastal Gardener. It's finally starting to warm up outside, so that means spring is here. So that means we're going to make some tasty, refreshing dishes straight out of the garden. So we've got our greens picked and washed and ready to go. So today I'm going to show you how to make two dishes, and I want to show you some kind of different ways to use greens because a lot of adults and children struggle with getting enough vegetables in their daily diet. So here are some alternatives or some tasty ways to help you get in those greens throughout the day. So the first one is a salad, and we're going to make a homemade dressing because that's pretty cost effective, cheaper, and healthier. So this is a raspberry vinaigrette, which is one of my favorites. It's got olive oil, vinegar, salt and pepper just to taste, and then raspberry jam. So we just combine those all together. Give it a little bit of a mix so that oil won't be so separated. And you can add some different ingredients into your salad if you'd like, some carrots or tomatoes, but we've just got the greens straight from the garden, and this dressing will add a nice flavor to it. So just drizzle a little bit of that on. And then I like to add some sunflower seeds just to give it a little bit of a crunch. Or you can use chow mein noodles or nothing at all if you'd like. The dressing really has a good flavor. So sprinkle those on. And then you got a salad ready to go. You can eat it as a snack by itself, or you can eat it as a side dish, whatever you want. And then this other one, I'm going to show you how to make a green smoothie, which I know what you might be thinking. You're thinking, green smoothie, that's disgusting. I don't want to put vegetables in a drink. But this is actually very delicious, and you add fruit in with the vegetables to give it kind of a little bit of that sweet flavor, so it doesn't feel like you're just drinking vegetables. So this one has 2 cups of spinach, and this will be for 2 servings. And you don't want to pack it in too tight, but squish it down a little bit, but not where it's just totally crammed in there. So we got about 2 cups in there, cup of water, 1 banana, and then I've got 6 strawberries here. You can use about 4, 5, 6, depending on the size. So just add all those together, and then all right, so I've got the smoothie all blended up, and you want to keep it in there a little bit longer, and it'll really get that nice green color to it that you're looking for. Otherwise the color might not be as good. So got the smoothie ready to go. And this is going to give you some calcium from the spinach. You're going to have some potassium from your bananas and some vitamins from your strawberries. So it's a very healthy dish, a healthy treat. And if you feel like it's lacking a little bit of flavor, you can add a little bit of sugar or honey to it to give it a little bit of the sweetness. But I really think you should try it by itself, and you'll find that the strawberries and the bananas combined are really quite delicious. And then with your salad, you're going to have the calcium from your leafy greens, and the darker they are, the better for the calcium. And then you'll have a little bit of the protein with the sunflower seeds and some of your healthier fats with the olive oil that we used in the dressing. So some healthy fats, lots of vitamins and minerals for you to have with your vegetables. So great ways to increase your vegetable consumption, and actually your children will, if you try to have them try the green smoothie, you may find that they actually will really love those too. Drink it through a straw. But strawberries are in season throughout April. That's the peak month in North Carolina, so check out your local farmers markets and go get some strawberries. Otherwise, stay tuned for next month and I'll show you another tasty treat out of the garden.